It was a cold night in December, and I was driving on a lonely highway in Arizona. I was coming back from a business trip and had decided to drive through the night to get home faster. The highway was quiet, with no signs of life for miles. The only sounds I could hear were the hum of my car's engine and the faint whisper of the wind outside. The road stretched endlessly in front of me, and there wasn't a single streetlight to guide the way. My eyes were getting heavy, and I kept telling myself, just an hour more, and I'll pull over for a break. Suddenly, in the distance, I saw a figure standing by the side of the road. At first, I wasn't sure if it was real or if my tired mind was playing tricks on me. As I got closer, the figure became clearer. It was a young man, waving his arms in the air. He looked desperate, and his clothes were dusty and torn. I hesitated. Every instinct in me screamed not to stop. I had heard countless stories about how stopping for strangers on the highway could lead to danger. But then I thought, what if he really needs help? What if his car is broken down and he's stranded out here in the middle of nowhere? I decided to take the risk. I slowed down and rolled down my window slightly. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked. The man nodded quickly. "Yes, please. My car broke down a few miles back. I just need a ride to the next gas station." His voice trembled as he spoke, and he looked genuinely scared. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the car door and let him in. He sat in the passenger seat, clutching his jacket tightly around him. I tried to make small talk to ease the tension, but he didn't say much. He gave short answers and mostly stared straight ahead. As we drove, I noticed he kept fidgeting with something in his jacket pocket. It looked like he was holding onto something, but I couldn't tell what it was. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a knife? A gun? I tried not to let my fear show, but my hands tightened on the steering wheel. To break the silence, I asked, "So, what happened to your car?" There was a long pause before he answered. "It just broke down," he said softly, avoiding eye contact. His vague response only made me more uneasy. We drove for a few more miles in silence. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't stop glancing at his hands. Every time he moved, I tensed up, expecting the worst. Then, up ahead, I saw something that felt like a lifeline, a police car parked at a rest stop. Without thinking, I said, "I need to stop here for directions. Hope you don't mind." He didn't respond, but I could feel his tension. As soon as I pulled into the rest stop, I parked as close to the police car as I could. Before I could even get out, the man flung open the car door and ran into the darkness. I was shaken, but I immediately got out and approached the police officers. I explained what had happened and described the man. They listened carefully, then told me something that sent chills down my spine. "There have been reports of a man fitting that description," one of the officers said. "He's been stopping cars on the highway, robbing drivers at knife point. You're lucky you stopped here." My knees felt weak, and I had to sit down. The officer assured me they would search for the man, but I couldn't help thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't stopped at the rest area. For the rest of my drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I kept looking in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see him again. Every shadow on the road made my heart race. That night taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Sometimes the kind thing to do can also be the dangerous thing. I'm grateful that I trusted my instincts and stopped when I did, but I'll think twice before picking up a stranger again. Even now, years later, I can't drive alone at night without remembering that man and his piercing stare. What was he planning to do? I'll never know for sure, but I'm just glad I didn't stick around to find out. It was a rainy evening when I started my drive back home from my cousin's house. The family gathering had been lovely, and I felt happy as I got into my car. However, the weather was far from ideal. Heavy rain was pouring down, and the windshield wipers were working at full speed. I was on the I-80 freeway, a busy highway that stretched for miles. Normally, this road would be packed with cars, but tonight, the rain had slowed everyone down. The visibility was terrible. The rain made it hard to see the road ahead, and the headlights of oncoming traffic looked like blurry orbs of light. I adjusted my speed, keeping to about 40 miles per hour, even though the speed limit was higher. Most drivers were doing the same. Everyone seemed cautious, except for one vehicle, a large semi-truck. It sped past me, splashing water onto my windshield. For a moment, I couldn't see anything and had to rely on my instincts to stay on the road. That driver is crazy, I muttered to myself, shaking my head. The truck was moving too fast for the conditions. I had a bad feeling about it, but told myself to focus on my own driving. About 10 minutes later, traffic started slowing down even more. I saw brake lights glowing ahead of me, and the cars in my lane were coming to stop. I pressed my brakes gently, not wanting to skid. My tires made a slight squealing noise, but I managed to stop just in time. That's when I saw it. Up ahead, the semi-truck that had sped past me earlier had jackknifed. Its trailer had swung sideways, blocking almost all the lanes. Several cars had already collided with it. It was a mess. Some vehicles were crushed, while others had spun out and hit the barriers. I could see drivers and passengers climbing out of their cars, looking shaken and scared. I was still processing what I was seeing when I heard a loud screech behind me. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw another car sliding out of control. My heart raced as I realized it was heading straight for me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly and braced myself. The car hit my rear bumper with a loud thud, pushing me forward slightly. Luckily, the impact wasn't too strong, and my seatbelt kept me safe. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. As the rain continued to pour, the situation on the freeway became more chaotic. I turned off my car and got out to check the damage. My bumper was dented, but it wasn't serious. The driver who had hit me also stepped out, apologizing repeatedly. She was a young woman, probably in her late 20s, and looked terrified. "It's okay," I told her, trying to reassure her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No, but..." "This is so scary," she said, her voice trembling. We both turned our attention to the pileup ahead. By now, more cars had crashed into the wreckage. Some drivers were trying to help others, while a few stood by, unsure of what to do. The scene was chaotic, horns blaring, people shouting, and the relentless rain adding to the confusion. I decided to help. I grabbed my phone and called 911, explaining the situation to the operator. They assured me that emergency services were on their way. Then, I walked toward the wreckage to see if anyone needed assistance. The first car I approached had a family inside, a woman, a man, and a little boy who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. The front of their car was badly damaged, and the airbags had deployed. The woman was struggling to open her door. "Are you okay?" I asked, raising my voice to be heard over the rain. "We're okay," the man replied, but his voice was strained. "The door won't open, and my wife's leg is stuck." I tried pulling the door, but it wouldn't budge. Just then, another driver came over to help. Together, we managed to force the door open. The woman winced in pain as we helped her out, but she assured us it wasn't too serious. The little boy looked scared, his eyes wide with fear. "It's going to be okay," I told him softly. "The police and ambulance are coming." I stayed with the family for a few minutes until they were safe. Then I moved on to check on others. The scene was overwhelming. Some people were standing in the rain, crying or calling their loved ones. Others were sitting in their cars, too shocked to move. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the sound of sirens. Police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances arrived, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness. The emergency responders quickly took control of the situation. Paramedics attended to the injured, while firefighters worked to free those trapped in their vehicles. I gave my statement to a police officer, explaining what I had seen. He nodded and took notes, thanking me for helping where I could. By the time I got back to my car, the rain had started to let up, but the freeway was still a mess. Traffic was backed up for miles, and it would be hours before everything was cleared. I sat in my car, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. As I waited to be allowed to leave, I thought about how quickly things could change. One moment I was driving peacefully, and the next I was in the middle of a nightmare. The memory of the speeding truck stayed with me. If the driver had just slowed down, none of this might have happened. When I finally got home, it was past midnight. I was tired, but I couldn't sleep. The images of the wreckage and the frightened faces of the people I had helped kept replaying in my mind. That night taught me an important lesson. Safety comes first, especially in bad weather. It's better to arrive late than not at all. Now, whenever I drive in the rain, I'm extra careful. I keep a safe distance from other vehicles and always remind myself to be patient. I'll never forget that night on the freeway. It was a terrifying experience, but it also showed me the importance of helping others in times of crisis. Sometimes, even small acts of kindness can make a big difference. It was late at night, and I had just finished a long shift at work. My office was about an hour's drive from home, and I was looking forward to getting into bed. The highway was quiet, with only a few cars here and there. I turned on my playlist and started driving. The soft hum of the music and the empty road gave me a sense of calm. The night was cold, and the streets were dark. The only light came from the occasional street lamp or the headlights of passing cars. I wasn't scared. I'd made this drive many times before. The highway felt almost familiar, like a friend that guided me home. About halfway through my journey, I noticed my fuel gauge was low. I knew there was a gas station a few miles ahead, so I decided to stop. When I reached it, the place was almost empty. A single car was parked near the convenience store, but there was no sign of the driver. I got out, locked my car, and started refueling. The cold air made me shiver, and I glanced around. The gas station was eerily quiet. The only sounds were the hum of the fuel pump and the occasional rustle of the wind. After filling up the tank, I went inside the store to grab a snack and a drink. The clerk behind the counter was on his phone and barely looked at me as I paid. I didn't think much of it. I got back into my car, locked the doors, and continued driving. About 20 minutes later, something didn't feel right. It was a strange sensation, like I wasn't alone. At first, I brushed it off as my tired mind playing tricks on me. I kept driving, telling myself to focus on the road. But the feeling didn't go away. It got stronger. My palms started sweating, and I couldn't shake the sense that someone was watching me. I glanced in my rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it, a shadowy figure crouched in the back seat. My heart nearly stopped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Who was this person? How did they get in? What did they want? I forced myself to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't help. I kept driving, pretending I hadn't noticed. My mind was racing, trying to come up with a plan. Should I confront them? Should I stop the car and run? What if they had a weapon? Up ahead, I saw the bright lights of a rest area. There were a few cars parked there, and I could see people standing around. It felt like my only chance. I took a deep breath and said, "I need to make a quick stop. Hope you don't mind." The figure didn't respond, but I could feel their tension. I pulled into the rest area, parking as close to the people as I could. As soon as the car stopped, I flung open my door and jumped out, yelling for help. The stranger in my car must have realized they'd been caught. They tried to run, but a man who had been standing nearby, probably a truck driver, acted quickly. He tackled the stranger to the ground and held them there until the police arrived. I was shaking as I explained everything to the officers. They searched the stranger and found a knife in their pocket. My blood ran cold when I saw it. The police said the person likely slipped into my car when I was inside the gas station. I had locked my car, but I must have been distracted and left it open for a moment. After the police took the stranger away, I sat in my car for a long time, trying to calm down. I kept replaying the events in my head, thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't stopped at the rest area. That night changed me. I used to feel safe driving alone at night, but now I'm always on edge. Every time I get into my car, I check the back seat. Even if I know the car is empty, I still look. It's become a habit I can't break. I also learned to be more careful at gas stations and other stops. I never leave my car unlocked, not even for a second. It's scary to think how one small mistake can lead to something so dangerous. I'm grateful to the people at the rest area who helped me that night. Without them, things could have ended very differently. But even with their help, the memory of that stranger in my back seat still haunts me. Sometimes, late at night, I think about what they were planning to do. Were they just looking for a ride? Or did they have something more sinister in mind? I'll never know for sure, but I'm thankful I acted quickly and got away safely. Driving alone at night isn't the same for me anymore. Every shadow feels like a threat, and every noise makes me jump. But I remind myself to stay vigilant and trust my instincts. That night was a wake-up call, and I'll never take my safety for granted again.